Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Silver Mont, and this video is about Space Marine 2. That's SM2. I did a quick review of this title prior to launch. Now that I've had time to complete the campaign, play all of the operations, try out the PvP modes, and in general, get used to the game, play a lot of it, I'm going to touch on it again just to flesh out that review. My first impressions of the game were positive. Now that I've gotten to grips with it, they are even more positive. If you'd like to know more about the game in general, do check out my first review videos. I'm not going to touch on the same points here. Instead, I'll talk briefly about the campaign and other aspects I didn't cover last time. Campaign is fairly short, so if you're planning to get the game just for the campaign, you may feel like you don't get your money's worth, if only because it's short. The quality is good. There could have been perhaps a few more set-piece moments, but the final mission is full of fantastic ones. The plot was maybe too much like the first Space Marine in some ways, and maybe that's just part of, Warhammer 40k these days, but when there are so many different factions, I find the one the game ends up focusing on perhaps the most boring, personally. Still, the campaign is a lot of fun to play with friends. I had a great time. The PvP is surprisingly fun. It feels a lot like the sort of PvP you'd get in the, 2007, 2008 Xbox 360 days. It's simple, just the basics. Currently there's 3 different modes. You can choose Quick Match to get into a lobby, then you'll stay in that lobby on the same team until you leave to find a new one, and no cycled matchmaking. This isn't some crazy tournament esports game, it's old-fashioned deathmatch. 3 maps at the moment, and I've been kind of enjoying it. Time to kill, movement options, and abilities in the PvP kind of put me in mind of the enjoyable aspects of Gears of War, one of the only games I was ever good at when it came to PvP, and Titanfall 2's Titans. I'll emphasize Titans, like Last Titan Standing mode, not the on-foot segments of Titanfall 2, which are very fast time to kill and high mobility. But when you're in the Titans, you're slower, you move more methodically, time to kill is relatively high, each Titan forms a sort of counter for another in some ways. I'm not saying Space Marine 2 is exactly like that, or Gears of War, but if I had to compare it with other titles I've played, those two are what spring to mind. I'm having a good time with it. If I had to rate some complaints, it would be that currently the Vanguard grappling class seems a bit broken in PvP. Effectively, if you're in a 1v1 scenario and you grapple someone, they have virtually no counters and very slim chance of survival. Grappling onto someone isn't a skill shot either, like a sniper. It's very generous, practically auto-aimed, that stuns them for the full duration of the grapple, puts you in a very advantageous situation. The only way to really survive being grappled, essentially, is if the person grappling you then tries to melee you and you backpedal whilst blasting them in the face, or to have a buddy with you at the time to mow down the person grappling you mid-grapple. Beyond that, the sniper is maybe a little too strong, especially when not played as a sniper, but as a dude who runs around with a fast recharging invis and an SMG to mow you down from behind. All these issues can be ironed out and tweaked, and the PvP is a fun distraction, at any rate. Operations, though, are the real meat of the game. There's currently 6 of them, I think. They plan on adding more over the coming months, for free. That seems to be the plan. These scale across multiple difficulty levels, and have plenty of replayability, if you're into that sort of thing. You like Left 4 Dead, Vermintide, Darktide? It's not exactly the same, but it's that sort of style. Some of the operations are more fun than others, but they're all decent, and I've been getting lots of enjoyment out of them so far. That's where the longevity comes in as well. You can level up each of the 6 different classes, getting them, more perks, more armor, more weapons, and all that sort of thing. Indeed, the negatives I have in regards to Space Marine 2 at time of writing are quite limited. Most are technical issues. First up, the matchmaking, servers, and all that sort of thing. They're a bit iffy. Yesterday I tried to load into some operations with my friend, and sometimes we would just hang on an infinite join screen. Sometimes you can't join people at all, sometimes people can't join you, sometimes you get stuck on screens or in lobbies or whatever. I don't know if the PvP is peer-to-peer or dedicated servers, but I think it's peer-to-peer. The netcode hasn't seemed horrid to me. but then I've had like 20 ping in most of my matches. But when my American friend joined me, his ping was in the 120, 150 range, which you'd think would be fine, but still was a bit higher than I thought. I was anticipating, I don't know, 70 to 100 for him based on other games we've played. The other biggest issue I have with the game is the performance. The game seems fairly solid and scalable on the GPU front, but the CPU side seems to be incredibly punishing. That is to say, I can max the game's graphics out or have them on minimum, and it doesn't really make any difference when it comes to performance, because the CPU is the limiting factor here. Indeed, the game's Steam page says the recommended processor, not the minimum, the recommended, is the i7-12700, which, as it happens, is the exact processor I have. Yeah, I saw my frame rate dip as low as the 40s in Operations and Campaign, like 45 at times, when lots of enemies are on screen. That is really the main cause of CPU annihilation in this game. When these huge swarms of enemies appear, it just can really tank your frame rate, making me drop like 15 frames and stuff. Is that the machine spirit rewarding us for killing these swarms by giving us more frames? Who can say? Either way, more optimization can surely be performed to help out the CPU side of things here, right? I mean, sure, they could, in theory, slap in DLSS frame generation, but that's a bit of a workaround, right? You're not really optimizing the CPU side, you're just kind of bypassing that with these additional simulated frames, however you want to call them. Either way, these problems aren't tremendous ones. When you review a lot of games, it can make you a bit hypersensitive to frame drops. I used to play Dynasty Warriors 3 in slow motion. My computer back in the day would run at frames per minute in World of Warcraft whenever I went to Shattrath City. Literally, like, 10 frames a minute. When I think about that, it feels kind of stupid to be going, oh, I went from 60 FPS to 45 or 55, you know? But at the same time, it is an issue, because it does impact the smoothness and the fluidity of the game. Whether or not you find that important, though, is up to you. But you should be informed about these things. Anyway, as the title and thumbnail no doubt informed you, I strongly feel like Space Marine 2 might be my game of the year. The year isn't over yet, but right now there's only 2 other games I've enjoyed to the point where I think they can compete with Space Marine. Granblue Fantasy Relink and Shadow of the Erd Tree. Considering the latter's a DLC or an expansion, maybe we can't even qualify it for Game of the Year. But Space Marine 2 has just felt so fun to play. I mentioned it when talking about the PvP, but this game, in a good way, reminds me of 360 games. Sure, it has a season pass, but it's incredibly out of the way and non-intrusive. Like, you're really not missing out on much by skipping the season pass. It's like a skin for the heavy and a few colours, and I think that's pretty much it. I think in the next season, like season 2 and 3, you'll get like another champion skin for a class and some more colours, but really, there's good enough armour and colours already in the game. This isn't like Darktide, where if you don't pay real money, then you are stuck with all awful looking gear, you can't get anything good. It feels like a simple, satisfying game that gives you what you want. Or at least it gives me what I want. Good co-op, fun PvP, which I don't have to do. If I don't want to do the PvP, I'm not really missing out on anything, because I can get the same rewards from PvP from other areas. Imagine doing that. Imagine not being Destiny, where you force people into your awful PvP mode to get content. Well, it also has a solid campaign that I think will have decent replay value, if I want to play it with different friend groups, maybe on a higher difficulty. The title's also crossplay in the PvE modes, so you can play with console players or PC players. I think the consoles have PvP crossplay, so if you're on PlayStation, you can fight people on Xbox and so on, but on PC, there's no PvP crossplay. Which makes sense because, you know, mouse and keyboard versus controller is a whole big thing, right? In general, though, very solid game. I'm looking forward to what the free content updates will entail. I'd love if new enemy meant new factions of enemies, as in orcs, but I get the impression that's being way too optimistic, and it's probably going to be more like new enemy as in a new enemy type, like, I don't know, the Tyrannid Mega Muncher, or whatever. I live in hope those green rascals will show up, though, so I can happily bash their brains, or lack thereof, in once again, you know? I can recommend this game though. You don't need to know Warhammer to enjoy it. If you like co-op shooters, this one will keep you engaged for a good while, I reckon. Either way, thanks so much for watching. See you soon. Ciao.